continue our series through the book of Mark, the Gospel according to Mark. We are now at the last part of chapter 5, verses 21 through 43, and I titled this, Jesus' Touch. Now, actually, this particular one section ties right into the last one that we did, and we'll see that because we had Jesus' power over the storm, his power over demons. Those are the last ones that we covered. And now we're going to have his power over sickness and his power over death. So the four things really tie together. It's kind of like there's a full series, okay, of Jesus' life and work during that period. But now we have is to deal with four suffering people. When we first look at it, we think there's two. No, there's four suffering people in this section. Okay? You've got Jairus. You've got his wife, often forgotten, their daughter, and then the woman with the hemorrhage. We're going to look at each one of these and see how they all have a lot in common, but they all have their own aspects to what Jesus has to teach to them. And we're going to see the compassion of Jesus. We'll see it in ways that quite often are missed. So as we go through, we're going to look at the big picture. And then we're going to look at the individuals. So starting off in verse 21. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, so that he stayed by the seashore. Remember, Jesus had crossed over the Red Sea, or the Sea of Galilee. Now he's coming back. So now he's back. He stays by the seashore because, again, he's got these huge crowds that are coming. And they're coming and they're pressing in around him. But now we have, in verse 22 and 23, one of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and seeing him, fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she might get well and live." Now, the synagogue official, we're going to have to look at a little bit. He would, might say, be somebody that worked in the synagogue. But he wasn't, he would be around the Pharisees, but wouldn't necessarily be a Pharisee. And that part's important as we go along. But he falls at Jesus' feet, and he's imploring him, "My little daughter." And we can learn from the other Gospels, it's his only child. So it's not just, that just kind of exemplifies it a little bit more. And then, "Please come." You can just see him begging Jesus to come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and so that she will live. So in verse 24, he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. So Jesus agrees to go. He doesn't hesitate. He agrees to go. And now, but the crowd is still there. The crowd is still pressing on him. And you can just see poor Jairus, he's trying to hurry things along because he's so concerned about his little daughter. But the crowd is there, but Jesus is coming. Even though he's being hindered, he still is coming. And then in verse 25 and 26, a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much at the hands of many physicians, and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. Now we got a delay. Jairus is trying to hurry Jesus along, even though he has a crowd, and now this woman shows up with a need. Verse 27 and 28. After hearing about Jesus, she came up with the crowd behind him and touched his cloak, for she thought, "If I just touch his garment, I will get well." Interesting little side note here, that word that's translated touched actually would be better translated grasped. Grasped and clung onto. In verse 29, immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt it in her body, and she was healed of her affliction. She knew she was healed. She could feel it immediately. And then verse 30, 31, we have another immediately. Jesus perceived in himself that the power had proceeded from him, had gone forth, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" The disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" It's almost like a silly question. I mean, people are pushing from all sides, and you're asking, "Who touched you?" You can see the disciples' frustration in this. Okay? They're men. They're not grasping what is happening. Who touched me? Verse 32 and 33, and he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fear and trembling, aware that it would happen to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. She was frightened, but she was so desperate that she went through this crowd. And she finally got to Jesus, grasping hold of him. And now she got caught. And she's terrified. What's going to happen? I didn't ask. I didn't come to Jesus and say, "I have this problem. I need healing." No, I just grasped for it. Verse 34. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." We have two little interesting side notes in this verse. When Jesus said to her and called her daughter, this is the only time in Scripture where Jesus uses that term. He never uses it any other time. It's one of those little things that we have to understand about the miracles of Jesus. Every single one of his miracles are unique. They're always for that person that's receiving it. But then there's one other little thing that also, a little slight mistranslation at first, but it's not really not so slight. It said, "Your faith has made you well, go in peace," and that really should say, "Go into peace." It does change the meaning. But when you go back to the original text, that should be into, not in. And as we go along, we're going to see how important that is. Verse 35 and 36, now you can tell Jairus, of course, is kind of probably getting beside himself. He's trying to hurry Jesus along, and Jesus gets delayed, and then this woman comes along, and then he's just feeling a little more frustrated. And then while this is all going on, while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, "Your daughter has died." This delay has cost my daughter her life. Why trouble the teacher anymore? But Jesus, overhearing what had been spoken, said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid any longer, only believe." Jesus' immediate reaction is words of comfort. Don't give up. It's okay. I said I would come with you. Just believe. Verse 37, and he allowed no one to accompany him except for Peter and James and John, the brother of James. It's another interesting little side note which we'll get into more here in a moment. Verses 38 and 39, they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion, and the people loudly weeping and wailing. And he entered in, and he said to them, "Why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep." When he gets to the house, and the interesting thing is you have to understand culture a little bit. In those days, people would hire mourners. So they would come. Yeah, they would hire mourners to come and help bring the sorrow to a higher level. You know, it's kind of like in our day we have paid protesters. Somewhat of the same thing, okay? They themselves independently could care less, but They're being paid to be here. So they're going to do their job. And then, of course, Jesus is saying the child has not died but is asleep. So what happens? We go to verse 41. And they began laughing at him, putting them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, and entered the room there the child was. And taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And 42 and 43, immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that something should be given to her to eat. Let's go back and take a look at this whole factor of Jesus only allowed 3 of his disciples to accompany him, and the mother and the father. Okay? Why would Jesus only allow those, and then to go further after Jesus had raised this child from the dead? Don't tell anybody. It was part of Jesus' compassion. Because you can imagine a 12-year-old girl that has died is publicly raised from the dead. And remember what happened to Lazarus after he was raised from the dead, where people, you might say, were clamoring to him, and you might say just giving him all kinds of grief. What happened to you? Well, this is a 12-year-old child. Jesus is in his compassion is going to keep it quiet. See, since the crowd wasn't there, they didn't actually witness it themselves. There's going to be lots of controversy saying, well, Jesus said that she was just asleep. So no, she wasn't actually raised from the dead. She was just healed, and Jesus has done this many times. Now, if they would have been there and seen that she was actually dead, this child's life would have been miserable. See how Jesus' compassion, even in some of the details that we would forget about? Jesus was never looking for fame. He was here as a servant, and that was part of the way he worked. So for the sake of normal development, he kept it quiet. Now we're going to back up a little bit and go through some of these little finer details. See, Jesus' power over the storm, over the demons, over sickness, and over death. Those 4 instances had just happened in succession. And you got 4 suffering people. Jairus, his wife, his daughter, and the woman. Jairus, of course, this is his only child. And she is sick. And she is almost at the point of death when he leaves. He finds Jesus, and Jesus agrees to come with him. And then they're delayed because this woman who has this hemorrhage comes. And they stop, and Jesus heals her. But it takes time. And then he hears this news about your child has died. This man is suffering. But the one thing that easily gets missed is the mother. See, the mother is only mentioned one time, and only almost in passing. But here again, this is a demonstration of our human nature and what I would call a mother's love. See, Dad is going to go get Jesus. Dad is going to go after the healer. But where's Mom going to do? She's going to stay at her daughter's side. She's not leaving. Even though she can't do anything, she is going to stay there. And you can imagine she's staying there day and night. She's watching her child. She's trying anything she possibly can. But when they have the discussion, you can just hear it between Jairus and his wife, and they're having a discussion about getting Jesus. The wife says, I'm staying here. You go get Jesus. We don't both need to go. Somebody needs to stay here, and that somebody is me. When we understand a mother's love, we can understand the circumstances and how this all came out. Now you've got the daughter and the woman. And both of them are shown with that 12 year. The daughter is 12 years old. The woman had suffered for 12 years. So the entire life of the daughter, which was filled, you might say, with joy and happiness and growing up, you might say, in a middle-class family, because they would have been middle class. For those 12 years, this woman was suffering. Side by side, even though they don't know each other, they know nothing about each other, but these two instances are happening at the same time. See, our lives have many challenges, and we see it in other people, and well, why them this and me this and so on. It's all part of the way that God planned things. See, God had a plan for both of these women. For the little girl, God's plan was for her to be healed and raised. For the woman, God's plan was for her to be healed. But we have to remember the time in which this happened again. See, this woman, because of what she had, which was an uncontrollable flow of blood, which would have made her very weak, and that part wasn't the worst. The worst part of, she would be totally ostracized. She would not be allowed to go to the temple, to even the woman's court. She would not be able to go to the synagogue. She would not be able to be around her family. She would not be able to be around her friends. She was unclean. So she literally suffered not just the illness. She was a social outcast. And for her to go into a crowd knowing that she's an outcast and she's not allowed to do this shows her faith. She is so determined because she believes 100% that Jesus can heal her and Jesus will heal her. She is going to go against all of what society says. And she is going to pursue what she needs, and she needs is Jesus. Now, if you're missing a lesson in there for ourselves, you're missing a lot. We need to pursue Jesus. That's the woman. The daughter, like I said, 12 years of growing up, being an only child in a middle-class family, a good life. And then suddenly comes down with a sickness, and that sickness is a sickness which we don't know what it is, nor does it matter, but it's going to lead to death. See, the depth of sorrow for both Jairus, for his wife, and for this woman. Where they were at the low end. And even the daughter, even the little girl, they were sitting in hopeless situations. There was nothing that they could do. They were trying. The woman spent all of her income on doctors. Heal me. I'll heal you. Just give me 2 shekels and it'll be done. And every time she did, it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And it just shows us that there is no healing for our soul in this world. It's only Jesus that heals our soul. See, both of them came with a public request. Jairus came straightforward, but you got to remember, he's a temple official. His acquaintances are Pharisees. The Pharisees are by this time plotting on how to destroy this Jesus. He is hated by the Pharisees. Jairus knows this. What is going to happen to him? What is going to happen to his job after it's found out that he went to Jesus for help? Because all of those around him in his employment have a hatred for Jesus, and you went to this Jesus? And you can just hear him say, yeah, but my daughter was dying. Doesn't matter. We hate Jesus, so you have to too. The stupid mindset we still have today with people, their mind is so set on evil that even when it's point blank put to them, they still want to stick with the evil. But both of these people also had something else in common. They came in faith. They believed. It wasn't a case of where they were hoping. They were coming knowing. See, the woman, if you remember, said, if I just touch his garment, I will be healed. Not I may be healed, not I hope I'm healed. I will be. Jairus, same thing. He said, Jesus, come with me. Heal my daughter. Not, well, I hope you can. I hope she's not too far gone. I hope that everything works out. No, come and heal. And then when he's told that his daughter died, and Jesus says to him, don't worry, just believe, Jairus does. He doesn't back off. Jesus said it. I believe it. And then the sensitivity of Jesus. With the woman, she comes scared. But Jesus gives her comfort even after she's healed, even after that she, I say, snuck in more or less. He didn't bawl her out. He didn't say, you shouldn't do that. You should have come to my face. You shouldn't have just grabbed me. No. He cared about how her life was and what it was going to be changed. He didn't scold her. He comforted her. The little girl, the one little point that gets missed. After Jesus raised her from the dead, and we have to understand that, he reached out and took her by the hand and raised her up. He says, don't tell anybody what this happened, but now go get her something to eat. See, this little girl had been laying on a sick bed for who knows how long. And I guarantee you she ain't been eating a whole lot. Not many people laying on sick beds dying have a healthy appetite. The two just do not go together. So I think we can rightly assume she was hungry. Because you gotta remember, she's healed. She's not just partially, she's not starting to get over it. It's not like, well, we've turned the corner now, and now as things move along, she'll keep getting better and better. No, she's immediately healed. And immediately says, where's the closest McDonald's? I'm hungry. A burger and fries would really go good right now. Jesus recognized this. He recognizes every aspect of what's going on. And he does it with such great sensitivity and care and loving kindness. It's too easy to miss that in the midst of these, what we call familiar Bible stories. These aren't just Bible stories. They're true stories. They're historical events that actually took place. Exactly like we read. Exactly like we see it. Let's go back to verse 34. And he said to her, not on the slides because it's not there, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Here again, remember, Jesus used that term daughter once in all his ministry, one time, and that was in this case. But then that other thing that we've learned was it's not go in peace. You understand what that, you just go ahead and leave and may peace surround you. No, Jesus actually said go into peace. See, your life has been nothing but the opposite of peace. All these things that have been happening in your life, all the ostracizing that is taking place, all the fact that you have been cast out of your own home. You can't go to the synagogue. You can't go to the temple. You can't go to the women's court in the temple. Now, you are going to continue a trip. You are going to continue traveling. But where is that traveling taking you? It's taking you into peace. Not just peace on you. You are actually literally be going into it. Because it's healed. So no matter what happens next in her life, she is going into peace. Because more than likely it's not going to just happen overnight that all of a sudden, now that she's been healed, that she's going to go home to her family and everybody's going to welcome her. She's going to go into the synagogue and everybody's going to welcome her. No, they're not going to believe it. They're going to want proof. But she needs to be in peace while this is going on. Again, Jesus' miracles are individualistic. They always speak to the need of that person while teaching all of us a greater truth. Both are being done at the same time. And when Jairus heard that his daughter had died, you can imagine the emotion that overflowed him. You probably could picture him as not necessarily saying anything, but where that peace, that hope, and mostly that hope, was shattered. He's now feeling as though all of the efforts he had done, everything, now, or maybe, why didn't I come a week earlier? Why couldn't Jesus had just bypassed this woman? Why could the crowds had not been smaller? Because if they would have been, he would have made it in time. You can just feel this emotion rolling over him. And Jesus, without even being asked the question, turns to him and said, "Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Just believe. I said I was coming. I haven't changed my mind." God makes a promise. He doesn't change his mind and say, well, circumstances changed. Jesus could have said, I got delayed by this woman, and these crowds, it just made it almost impossible for me to get there as quickly as possible. Sometimes things just don't work out in life. Sorry, but go back home. Go bury your daughter. That's not our Jesus. That's not the way that he works. He works in our lives where everything is going towards glory. And that glory actually reflects back to him, or is on him and reflects on us. And again, with a little girl reaching out his hand, not speaking to her, not grabbing hold of her, not putting a touch on her. For this person, in this instance, it's reaching out his hand and taking hers and lifting her up. You can visualize it in your mind. You can just see that happening. Jesus standing there, this girl is laying on her bed dead, and Jesus takes her hand and he starts lifting it up, and you can see her just immediately coming to life and getting up and walking. Like nothing ever happened. Like you never had the sickness in the first place. Like you never had died. It was immediately. And then Jesus, get her something to eat. She's got to be hungry by now. And that not allowing the crowds to see it. To me, that's another one of Jesus' kindnesses to this girl. I'm not going to make you a spectacle in your town. There will be lots of talk, but nobody will have surety in their minds. So very quickly, this will pass on as just another miracle that Jesus did when he healed the sick little girl. And that's happened many, many times before. So it's almost like it's not news anymore. Should have been. It would be great news every time, but it's not. Spectacular things, when we see them so often, we fail to recognize how spectacular they are. And Jesus knew that of the crowd. He knew that it would just go away fairly quickly. But we have these four that now they have peace and joy that replaced their sorrow and their suffering. See, that peace and joy that only comes from knowing Jesus. That's for all of us. That sorrow and suffering, that should be things in the past. So what we need to do is we need to strive to grasp him. But do we know why we need to grasp him? Do we know about those things in our life that are lacking, that we are failing? And on the other side, do we feel his power at work in us? I can tell you, when you have those moments, when you feel the power of God working through you, you don't forget them very quickly. They grasp a hold of you. And then in our travels, are we traveling into peace? Are we actually going through our life to where we are going into peace, not just traveling in peace? I have that peace over me. No, I'm traveling into it. It's not just over me. I am literally in it. Because as we started off with, Jesus has the touch of filling every need. The touch of Jesus is so filled with grace, with mercy, with loving kindness, with sympathy, with care, with compassion. All of these things are come from the touch of Jesus. But we have to have faith that Jesus has with us.